What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. I finished 56 drafts so far this summer, so I figured today we take a look at which players I've been drafting the most at every position and just talk about why I like drafting them so much. We'll start off with wide receiver, since these two players rank first and second overall among all positions, finding their way onto 27% of my teams each. That is Michael Pittman Jr. and Rashid Shaheed. We'll start off with Michael Pittman Jr. This one just seems glaringly obvious to me. I'm still really shocked his ADP hasn't risen higher. He's definitely moved up. I believe it's up like 10 spots since we started talking about him this offseason, but he remains the 51st wide receiver off boards, which is pretty wild given his career. He'll turn 28 in October, so still in his prime. Over the last 4 years, he's commanded 129, 141, 156, and then 111 targets last season. But he's finished in points per game as the wide receiver 25, 29, 19, and then 52. Now, I might be concerned about that sort of drop-off if he was like 32, 33 years old, or if there wasn't a glaringly obvious reason as to why his production declined. But the man literally had a broken back all of last season. He had the least accurate quarterback in the league throwing him the ball. So the fact that he still commanded 111 targets through 16 games, playing with a fractured back for 14 of those, is wildly impressive. But not shocking, because he's a great wide receiver, and he's clearly the type of wide receiver I want in fantasy, because he's willing to play through a broken back and still go out there and get production for me. I mean, he's missed at most one game in a season over the last 4 years, and let's be honest, Anthony Richardson is not going to be the Colts starting quarterback to open the season. We'll get into my thoughts on Anthony Richardson, thoughts on this team in the Saturday video where we go over all the latest news. But to open the season, Daniel Jones is going to be that team's starting quarterback. Pittman's been working out with Daniel Jones since they signed him this offseason. I truly just do not understand his ADP. If we assume that he breaks his back again, we assume that Anthony Richardson is the quarterback all season and continues to be the least accurate in the league, even then, he probably returns value. But that is the least likely outcome, and in most other outcomes, he shatters his ADP. Again, I am truly just shocked to see his ADP continue to be this late. That is why you don't necessarily wait to do underdog drafts till the very end of the summer, because I can promise you his ADP is going to keep going up, because people are going to look at this eventually. They're going to open their eyes and be like, what on earth is happening with his ADP? I would be drafting all summer long. As for Shaheed, he's also risen a tad, not as much, but up to the wide receiver 56 at the moment, which again, obviously too low. I get the concerns about quarterback play, and I'm sure some people are scared off because of the injuries, but if you're worried about injuries outside the top 55 wide receivers, then you're just playing the game wrong. That can't be something you're like focusing on this late. You got to be looking for upside, got to be looking for players who are talented and just capable of posting spiked weeks, multiple spikes week in a row, have a really good season. Overall, someone you can rely on in fantasy, not someone who's always just going to be sitting there as a decent bench option, but never make it into your starting lineup. Prior to his injury last season, over 70 yards in 4 of 6 weeks. He operated as a wide receiver 2 for the Saints last season. He's going to do the same this season. Every single report this offseason confirms he is their locked-in wide receiver 2. And it's on a team that, they're going to be playing from behind pretty much every single week. They're going to be playing with elevated pace under Kellen Moore. They're going to be playing in 9 dome games, 2 in the fantasy playoffs. Quarterback is really the only concern that we should have here, but I think a lot of that goes out the window when you just look at this roster and look at, the available target share on this team. Kamara, Olave, Shaheed. Those are 3 very good players, each going to command a very large target share, going to be good in fantasy. And you know that because you look behind them and you have a 32-year-old Brandon Cooks. You've got Juwan Johnson, who I like, but is obviously not going to go out there and command a 20% target share. He is obviously capped in what he can be. You've got Bub Means, Kevin Austin Jr., Cedric Wilson, Kendre Miller, Devin Neal, Cam Akers now. They do technically still have Taysom Hill, but it's going to be 35 coming off a late season torn ACL. So there's a 0% chance he starts the season healthy. A very strong chance that he misses half the year, is limited in the other half. So even if the offense is bad, even if the quarterback play isn't amazing, plays will be run on this team. Kellen Moore is going to run plays. He's going to play an elevated pace. And given the offensive talent, if you look at what Kellen Moore has done in his career, he has shifted like run versus pass splits to fit the offense. So when he's in Dallas, they're throwing the ball a ton. Throw the ball maybe a little bit less going into LA, but still leaning a pass-heavy team. In Philly, completely reverses because the talent on that team is run the football, utilize play action, but like the focus of that team should have been running. He's a smart head coach, but he's always going to play with pace, and he's always going to shift towards the team. Look at this offensive unit. The only 3 really good players on this team are Alvin Kamara, Olave, and Shaheed. You should be throwing the ball at a high rate. You should not be running the ball with Kendre Miller, Devin Neal, Cam Akers. That is not how they're going to win a couple football games, right? It's going to be through the aerial attack. That's going to be good for Shaheed. If he stays healthy, he will be a top 40 wide receiver. You can get him outside the top 55. That is a steal. At running back, it should be no surprise that my most rostered player is Jarquez Hunter, but we've talked about him a lot recently, so I'll do like a quick 1-minute take on Hunter, and then we'll go over my number 2 and my number 3 running back. So with Hunter, it really just comes down to price and opportunity. Goes at pick 190, means you can get him usually around 17, maybe around 18 he falls into. Aside from Marshawn Lloyd, I just don't really see any running backs in this range that I feel good about. So Hunter and Lloyd just become my default last picks. And Lloyd is actually my 4th most rostered running back because of that. But with Hunter, I truly believe that he is better than Blake Corum. I don't think they would have drafted him if they loved Blake Corum and they're like, oh, he's going to be an amazing number 2 for us. I think they kind of figured they want someone else back there. I also think they wanted to give Corum more work last season, but he's just not that good, and he doesn't do anything better than Kyren does. So with pretty much every game mattering a lot for the Rams last season, he didn't see the field much. With Hunter, again, I still think Kyren is a better running back. He is objectively better than Jarquez Hunter. But Hunter does offer a level of explosiveness that Kyren and Corum just don't have. And so I think that McVay wanted to add him to the offense so he can justify, taking Kyren off the field and utilizing just some different plays in the offense that are going to, just be a little bit better when you have a more explosive running back running them. So again, I don't think that Hunter is going to be their clear lead back and to take over for Kyren, but in round 17, if you're going to mix in on the Rams and you're still going to carry that, contingent upside of if Kyren gets hurt, you could be the 1A, that is a range where there's certainly no locks at the running back position. Again, very similar take as Marshawn Lloyd. So I like going with one of them round 17, 18 to round out the running back room, sometimes drafting both of them round 17 and 18 just to kind of fill things out. But usually end of draft, those are the 2 I'm looking at. Second most rostered running back is actually Bijan Robinson, which caught me off guard a little bit. I just didn't think I had that many shares of him. Obviously, I like him. I don't know. I just didn't realize I had over 20%. But with Bijan, it really comes down to how I view the top end of drafts right now. Jamar Chase is the 101. I think Saquon is the 102. And so with that playing out most of the time, you kind of get to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th pick, and you've got the trio of Jefferson, Lamb, and Bijan. That's pretty much is what happens at that spot. I have Bijan ranked 3rd, and that means I've been getting him a lot because people have really started to take Jefferson at that number 3 pick, way more heavily than they have been. And in a lot of drafts, people reach for CeeDee Lamb as well over Bijan. So it's ended up where I always get him at 3. I usually get him at 4, and I sometimes get him at 5. And so that's led to roughly 3x the field exposure on him, and then about half the field exposure on Lamb and Jefferson, which it's not like I want to, have a strong take against those 2. It's just that I've tried pretty hard to drop Bijan in the projections. I've tried to raise Lamb, raise Jefferson, but even in doing that and maybe going past what I want to do for any of these guys, just to try and get it to where Lamb and Jefferson can overtake Bijan, I just can't. At this point, I would need to apply artificial boosts just because mathematically, there's just not a way to value them over Bijan. It's not, again, really a hill I want to die on, and it's not like I'm never going to take Jefferson or Lamb over him. If I'm doing a ton of drafts, you don't want to have 35% Bijan and 0% Lamb and Jefferson, right? I'm not saying I'm, saying it's a lock that those guys are going to outproduce, or that Bijan's going to outproduce those two. I'm just saying right now, if I'm in one league, for sure I'm taking Bijan over them. And then just on average, I do want to be taking Bijan because, he pretty easily projects for 30 more half PPR points than those two. And taking him does open the door to pretty much any draft strategy you want to use. Besides RB0, like if you just take Bijan at anywhere from 3 to 5, really no matter what else happens for the rest of your draft, you're good. Like you can take whatever value is there. You're not gonna, it's unlikely you're gonna draft like 4 running backs in a row. So there's gonna be value that opens up at wide receiver, tight end, quarterback in that round 2 through 4 range. You'll still be able to attack the range we like in this middle round for running back. And so it's like taking Bijan doesn't really close any doors, and also opens up some doors to where maybe people do get really heavy into the running back position. You're able to take Bijan and then literally not take another running back in round 7, round 8. It just, from a draft strategy perspective, from a mathematical perspective, it just like all kind of makes sense to get him. And to be clear, I am not someone who's like locking in the Falcons to have this insane offense this season. I have them projected to be 15th in touchdowns this season, 6th in offensive plays run. Last season, they ranked 11th in offensive touchdowns, 5th in offensive plays run. So, and with them getting what I think is a quarterback upgrade, I'm downgrading like what we saw last season for this offense, and still he's going to project amazingly because he was 22 years old and had 1,887 yards and 15 touchdowns. Like he is the same age as Cam Scatterboo. He is younger than RJ Harvey. He is unbelievable, and he's going to have a massive share of this offense. Like it just makes all the sense in the world. So if we're in that 3 through 5 range, I've really been focusing on Bijan this season. Third most rostered running back. That I don't feel as strongly about. I kind of did this write-up and looked at these exposures, and I was like, am I wrong here? Because third most is Aaron Jones, right? And I've talked up Jordan Mason a ton because I love Jordan Mason. I think he's incredible value. But I kind of looked at ADP since I've been talking about Jordan Mason, and my average exposure, my average position drafting Jordan Mason is 105. Well, his current ADP is 95. So he's up 10 spots, and we've seen Aaron Jones kind of fall a little bit. And there's a lot of drafts you can get. My average ADP for Aaron Jones is 84th overall. I have gotten him at times, of course, past that because it's an average, right? So I've gotten him, and I've seen him fall into like the mid to even sometimes late 80s. And so it's starting to get to a point where you opened up, and it was like, an easy 2-round difference, sometimes 2.5, sometimes 3-round difference between these two. And it was like, okay, like if you think that, Mason's going to take this early down work, this goal line work, it's like there probably shouldn't be, a 2 to 3 round difference in ADP. But as we've shrunk that and we've approached a range where it's less than a round of ADP, well, now it's like, oh, okay, hold on a second, because Aaron Jones is still an incredible player. He is still someone that they value over Jordan Mason, that they brought in Jordan Mason to keep like Aaron Jones healthy, to keep him healthy, because they view him as the 1A. He still does have the more valuable role. I understand that, touchdown upside not there. I have Aaron Jones projected for 3.5 touchdowns, and I still have him as a great value. I've taken him as my third most rostered running back. So yes, I understand maybe being hesitant, being like, Nick, he's not going to have many touchdowns, but how many more or how many fewer than 3.5 do you think he's going to have? Like, do you think he's not going to score a single rushing touchdown all season? Because again, I have him projected clearly, if I have him as my third most rostered running back, I'm projected as a really good pick at 3.5 rushing touchdowns. He's going to have receiving touchdowns. He's going to have a ton of receptions. It's going to be a fantastic offense. We'll get to another player on this offense later on. I don't know. I just feel like maybe we've gotten to the point where, like, because everyone in the industry really likes Jordan Mason, that maybe we're going a little bit too into that point, and we see Aaron Jones, a very talented running back, coming off the most touches of his career, still highly efficient last season. We've seen no sort of drop off. I don't know. I really like this entire offense, but if we're going to get, the 1A on the Vikings approaching, the mid 80s into the low 80s, like that's a great value, because that's like the late 7th round. You can get him at the late 7th round, 8th round. Like that is a phenomenal value. At quarterback, most rostered is Kyler. We're going to do the same thing as Jarquez Hunter. I'll go over Kyler really quickly because we just talked about him, and then I'll go over my number 2 and my number 3 quarterbacks after that. But Kyler, yeah, he's just in a good range. He's in a really good range of the draft where, I have a lot of really good skill players locked up. I want to be taking a shot on a quarterback with upside, and I do think he has a higher ceiling than that next range of quarterback that goes right after him. Been a quarterback 1 in points per game every season of his career, clearly capable of elite rushing totals. We will see. It remains to be seen whether or not this season it will happen, but the ceiling is clearly there from a rushing perspective. I just like this offense overall. There's like 2 games all season where it's even possible that the Cardinals play in a poor weather spot that's just going to really add to the projection. I feel like no one really thinks about it. It was something we talked about a lot with the Lions last season, being like they play like a billion dome games in a row. They had like, what was it, 1 outdoor game before like championship weekend. It was something crazy like that. Like they just didn't play outdoors. And it's a similar story with the Cardinals this season. And one of their outdoor games is like San Fran. Like it's just like they don't play outside in bad weather spots, and that's gonna be very beneficial to them because we all know the home road splits for Kyler. But anyways, we talked about him in the Saturday video Saturday video. So go watch that. I'll link in the description box down below if you want a longer take on that. Second most rostered quarterback is Trevor Lawrence. I've taken him on average in the mid 12th round. Now, me and Trevor Lawrence have kind of a love-hate relationship. I did like him coming out of college. Most people did, but I've been fading him in recent seasons because he's clearly just lacked any sort of fantasy ceiling. Like across 4 years, 60 games played, a relatively decent sample. Trevor Lawrence has only scored over 20 fantasy points 20% of the time. He has scored at least 25 fantasy points 8% of the time. So he goes over 21 in every 5 weeks. He hits 25, 1 in every 12 weeks. That's a little bit brutal. This season, though, he's got the best supporting cast he's had. Brian Thomas Jr., best top wide receiver he's played with. At least, like, obviously he played with him last season, but like Brian Thomas Jr. this season will be better than Brian Thomas Jr. was last season. Travis Hunter, even as a rookie, in my opinion, will still be the best wide receiver 2 that he's ever played with. I also really like the hire of Liam Cohen as their head coach. The Bucs were fantastic last season, and that's even with Godwin missing half the year. It's with Evan missing, a month. Like the 4 games where Evans left super early and they didn't have Godwin, like both of those 2 things happening at the exact same time, they still averaged 25.25 points per game. Like this was a really good offense. And it's not like a lock that Liam Cohen's going to go in there to Jacksonville in season 1 and they're going to be as good as the Bucs were. But I'm optimistic about this passing game. And at the cost of the quarterback 19 in drafts, it just feels like really low risk. Even if the outcome happens where he doesn't hit much of a ceiling, he's more of a very consistent mid to high end quarterback too. That's not the end of the world when you draft them as the quarterback 19. And I do think that this season, he's going to have the highest ceiling of his career. My third most rostered quarterback is JJ McCarthy. Average ADP that I've been taking him is a little bit later than Lawrence, but still in like the mid 12th round. Just feels like another easy one. Kind of the same way that I feel about Michael Pittman Jr. I feel about McCarthy, and just being like, am I missing something here? Like, are people just blind right now and not understanding how good of a value these guys are? Last season, we were all over Sam Darnold because any quarterback, any starting quarterback in the Viking system with these coordinators, with this level of talent on offense, is going to be successful and is going to have a high-end weekly ceiling in fantasy. Heading into last season, Sam Darnold had averaged 182 passing yards per game, a 3.5% touchdown rate, a 3.1% interception rate, and 6.7 yards per attempt because he's not a good quarterback. But again, anyone you put in that system is going to put up numbers. What does he do? He's in the MVP conversation for a chunk of the season, ends up throwing for 254 passing yards per game, 6.4% touchdown rate, drops to a 2.2% interception rate, 7.9 yards per attempt. Those are elite numbers. Those are very, very good numbers, and it lands him a contract in Seattle. Now, we can't know for sure because he's never played a game, never played a regular season game in his career. But the odds are, and I would say the overwhelmingly likely outcome, is that JJ McCarthy is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. So why are we drafting him as the quarterback 18 right now when Sam Darnold just finished as a quarterback, 9 overall, 11 in points per game. Like, that is an amazing value for McCarthy. At tight end, we're doing a tight end sleepers video on Friday, so I'll save my number 1 most rostered tight end for that video because they are a sleeper. But number 2 and number 3 most rostered tight ends for me right now are Evan Engram and Jake Ferguson. Engram I've drafted on average with pick 114. That's like the mid-10th round. Ferguson I've drafted on average with pick 144. That is the last pick in round 12. And honestly, both offer just different draft strategy benefits just based on, how the draft is unfolding. With Engram, he goes in a range where there's a lot of really good players, but he goes right at the end of that range. So guys like Pittman, Egbuka, Kyler, Mason, Bo Nix, Jalen Warren, Shaheed, players that I really like this season, really want to be drafting, they go just ahead of them. And once they're off the board, I see a steep drop-off in talent, steep drop-off in value, and that's right where Evan Engram goes. So he's just sitting there, and I look at all these skill players, quarterbacks, and I'm like, man, we just missed out on a really, really good range, but I like Engram. This is someone who could play the Joker role in the Sean Payton offense. At the very least, it's going to be top 3, maybe top 2 in targets on this team. It's going to be an elite offense. He plays a position where there's 3 tight ends we feel great about, probably 8 that we feel solid about. So in terms of potential weekly advantage, who's more likely to provide an edge? Evan Engram or Jaden Higgins, Keon Coleman, Cam Scattaboo, Trey Harris, Tyron Tracy Jr., Luther Burton? I like some of the players in that list, but I think we can all agree that it's pretty unlikely any of those guys truly break out this season and just perform just as true difference makers to your roster. But every single one of them goes ahead of Evan Engram. So I don't know. It just feels like the appeal with Engram is that not only do you have a player that the head coach aggressively went out and was like, I want this guy because this is a missing piece for this offense. A player who we've seen be productive in fantasy in the past, who's highly athletic, which we like at tight end, obviously, and is just in a great role in that offense at a position that is not very good. So when someone does break out and provide a ton of value at a point in the draft where opportunity cost really falls off, it's just a great range to be drafting Evan Engram. And then from the strategy perspective as well, he opens the door to a 1 tight end build in redraft or a 2 tight end build on Underdog. The way where if you just wait a little bit longer into the next range of tight end, you can't really do that. You enter the range where Ferguson is in, where you have to double dip, or you have to take 3 on Underdog. And they're going, some of them, a little bit too early for me to like that a little bit more. At where you're taking Evan Engram, for you to only have to take 2 tight ends and draft one of them there, now we've invested very heavily at other positions and not too much at tight end, but we only need 2 or only need 1 in redraft. But if you wait a little bit longer, it's you're almost obligated to take 2, and then the value kind of goes away a little bit. But with Ferguson, the next guy, he enters the range where, at 144, we're 30 picks later, actually more than 30 picks by ADP later. Now we're in a spot where if I'm double dipping in a redraft league, if I'm triple dipping on Underdog, it's totally fine, right? Now the opportunity cost is much lower. He's going much later in the draft. If you wait this long for a tight end, it is totally fine. Again, 2 in redraft, 3 on Underdog. And if we look at the past, you're kind of getting someone who's consistently outperformed this ADP. In Dak's healthy games last season, the Cowboys ranked 1st in pass rate overall, 3rd in situation neutral pass rate. That's after ranking 6th in pass rate over expectation in 2023. It's going to be a very pass heavy team. During that time last season that Dak was healthy, Ferguson was 6th in expected points per game, 10th in actual points per game. That's a season after finishing 10th in expected and actual points per game. He's probably going to be in that general, he's not going to be a top 3 tight end, so he doesn't have that upside that Engram has, but he goes later in the draft, so it makes up for that. And he's probably going to finish in that tight end 7 to 12 range. And so when you're able to get him as a tight end 16, and it's at such low opportunity cost, you might as well, again, redraft league, just double dip and take 2 shots at tight end. Take him and then wait a little bit longer and draft Pitts. Take him and Goddard back to back. Just take 2 tight ends, or the tight ends we'll talk about in the sleepers video on Friday. The opportunity cost is there, and it's he's probably going to be in that general range where he's outperforming this. I don't know, tight end 16 for Ferguson, who's consistently outperformed that when his quarterback is healthy, to me, that's a no-brainer pick. So if you agree with any of my takes, head on over to Underdog, get drafting today. These ADPs are not going to last forever. I can promise you on some of them, the ADPs are going way up by the end of August. So I'm trying to load up while I can. If you have not yet signed up for an Underdog account, boy, do I have a deal for you. Anyone who signs up with promo code FFA this summer will not only get a deposit bonus up to $1,000, but you'll get my Underdog, Redraft, and in-season rankings for free this season, along with my draft and in-season projections. Best deal in the industry. And you can use that deposit bonus to really help out your ROI in year one. All right, that'll do it for this one. Please leave a like if you made it this far. Please subscribe to the channel if you are new here. I'll catch you all on Friday where we'll talk about some sleeper tight ends.